What is up, everybody? Welcome to the All-NBA show, part of the All-City Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Mares, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Tim Legler. Legs, another finals game, another win for the Boston Celtics. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Yeah, that was it was an interesting game, obviously. Very impressive by Boston. Their response to the initial surge, and then obviously the way they handled things down the end of the game when Dallas made that big comeback. So nothing but praise for Boston all the way around.
100%, man. We're going to talk a lot about them. I've been so impressed with them this whole run, or this whole finals, I should say. Not necessarily the whole playoff run, but the whole finals. We're going to talk about that. And last night, to me, was the cherry on top for that team and what they've done so far. We're also going to talk about Luka Doncic, who I was not impressed with last night. I haven't even talked to Legs about this, so I'm excited to hear his opinion as freshly as you guys will hear it about his end of the game last night. And then later on in the show, we're going to talk about Jerry West. I have some interesting thoughts about him, and I'm curious to talk to Legs. But first, we are presented as always by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. So you referenced it at the top of the show. The Mavs come out with great energy and they build a really nice lead in the opening minutes. And you kind of thought, okay, here it is. No Porzingis in this game. Dallas is the more desperate team. Is this the game where they sort of get their footing? Boston made a run and came back and ultimately opened up a 20-point lead before Dallas made what they've done in every single game to some extent. They made a run at the very end to make this game respectable and honestly make it in doubt in the closing minutes. But Boston handled that run as well and ended up pulling it out with some very clutch defense and offense. So that's the rundown of the game. Legs, what's the top story to you?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, so far, what's I think transpired in this series that I didn't expect. I thought Dallas's defense would be more impactful against Boston based on what I had seen out of Dallas's defense. That wasn't a slight against Boston in any way, shape, or form. I had that much belief in Dallas's defense. And that when they've needed to, they have not been able to stop them. And that's, to me, big part of what happened last night. I felt like the way the game started, and, I think it was a pretty safe bet to think Kyrie was going to get that over of 23.5. I felt like there's no way he's going to have 3 of these in a row. And he came out great and he was aggressive. Luka was very good early. They build the lead early with that big momentum and the surge and the energy in the building and all of that. And then yet at the end of the first quarter, we're up 1. And I thought that was very foreboding for Dallas overall. That did not feel like that should have been a 1-point lead. It felt like that should have been an 8 to 10-point lead. And the way they ended that quarter was really pretty disastrous. I mean, they had a stretch where Luka went out of the game and they gave up a 7-0 run in like a minute and a half. And then they had a stretch to close the half when Luka was on the floor. That was pretty disastrous. He missed a couple of step back threes late. One of those, he fell on the ground and kind of didn't make any effort to get back up. He laid there forever. Boston goes the other way. Hauser gets a transition trail 3. That would have been a 5-on-5 situation turned into 5-on-4 because Luka laid on the ground forever. Then the next one, he misses a step back 3, and they allow a throw ahead pass for an uncontested layup right before the quarter ends. So you felt like as well as Dallas played early, if they had closed the quarter better, and I'm not saying they're going to win the game, but certainly you're going to feel a lot different, man, if you play that well to start the game and you're up 8-10 going into the second quarter instead of a 1-point game. That I thought was a huge turning point in the game for Boston, the way that they closed the first quarter. You knew they were going to make a run against Dallas. Like they weren't going to just, beat them by 12, 15, 20 points. But the fact that they erased it in like 4 minutes going into the second quarter, I thought that was huge for the Celtics establishing control early in the game. And that was probably pretty demoralizing for the Dallas Mavericks, when that quarter horn sounded, they look up and they're up 1. As well as they played, Kyrie was going well, Luka was playing well. They had Lively was playing well early. Gafford. So they had all that, and yet, Adam, they're only up by 1 point. I thought that was psychologically important for the Boston Celtics.
There's no question. I actually think there's I don't know if there's anything in basketball that is more psychologically damaging than going up big right out of the gate on a team and closing the quarter. Not even like you blew it at the end of the half, but closing the quarter tied, or in this case, they were only up 1. That might be, especially in a moment, like if you just say the stakes, they're down 0-2, game 3 needs to be a statement. You throw a haymaker right out the gate and you go into the end of the break at the end of the first quarter tied. To me, that is among the most psychologically damaging things that can happen in sports. The real run came in the third quarter when they opened it up, but I agree with you. When I saw them close the gap in the first quarter, I just thought, I don't know what happens beyond here other than the Celtics are going to win this game. It's at least how I felt at the end of the first quarter.
Yeah, and to what I'm referencing, I'm just looking at the time and score, so we're clear on this. So Luka makes 2 free throws with a minute to go in the quarter to go up 6. Then Jaylen Brown misses a jump shot. Luka gets the defense rebound, so you're up 6 with the ball, coming up the floor with 45 seconds to play in the quarter. I mean, that's a pretty good spot to be in to get this thing to 8 or 9, and then you score, you get a stop. You're up 8-9 points at the end of the quarter. Instead, he misses a step back, pretty good shot, a good look. He just missed it. And then that's the play. He falls, come down. Hauser walks into the 3 with 28 seconds to go. Now it's a 3-point game, 31-28. Dallas comes up the floor. Luka misses another step back 3. Derrick White gets the rebound 5 seconds to go, throws it 50 feet in the air. Tatum catches the ball, lays in a layup 1 second to go in the quarter. I mean, you can't finish a quarter worse. If you're Dallas. And for Boston, look, not that look, they couldn't have come back from down 8-10, but just I'm talking more about psychologically from Dallas's perspective. To play that well early in a game, you have to have. And the other thing was psychologically, Kyrie Irving's going at that point. So now that's a relief because they haven't seen him play that well offensively as he did in the first quarter. All that adds up to, hey, you should have a comfortable lead. Luka then can get a little bit more rest maybe at some point in the second quarter, and you're feeling pretty good. Now, as it was, Adam, second quarter, neither team plays particularly well offensively. It's a 20-20 quarter. So it's still a 1-point game at halftime, and that is when everything changed. The third quarter for Boston was as well as a team can play on that stage. I mean, it was an absolute precision. Everybody that touched it made the right decision. They knocked down every clean look they got. They made some tough looks during that stretch as well. It was just absolute dominance. It was Boston at its best, and it was futile. That's what Dallas's defense looked against them in that quarter, and that's clearly, when they get the big separation, Dallas makes, another run in the fourth quarter, and they come up short. We'll never know what would have happened if Luka hadn't fouled out. Would have been nice to see him play the last 4.5 minutes in a 1-possession game just to see what that would have looked like. Doesn't matter. There's no excuses to be had here. That third quarter to me epitomized Boston at their best and epitomized the issues that Dallas has had in this series guarding them.
I want to go to the Boston's best though, to start off the show. Cause I've been so impressed with them through these 3 games, and look, they're going to win 80 games. If they close this out, they're going to get to 80 games on the wins on the season, which is just crazy. They might finish 80-20 overall between regular season and playoffs, which is historical. But the thing about the Celtics to me, they are a really fascinating multi-year arc for me. You go through it. I know people in the comments are going to say, hey, but this team is different than the ones previous. True. But there are some consistencies year over year between some of the same players, namely the key ones in Tatum and Brown. And watching that game last night and watching the whole playoffs and really this finals, they have matured so much to being a team that does not, get the highs and lows. They just stay the course. They respond to those big moments. So when they come out in the third quarter, as soon as that quarter started, the way it started, you kind of just felt like, there it is. They not only weathered the storm, they figured it out, and they have unbelievable confidence and ability to execute in this quarter. And as much as they were talented and probably talented enough to win in previous seasons, made it to the finals, made it to conference finals, all these different things, To me, that personality of the team is the thing that's so fascinating. And when you follow a team like the Celtics year over year and you see that personality develop and become solidified, it's so much more rewarding to me, because sports aren't just about talent. They're also about those intangible things. And that game last night, and Jaylen Brown in particular, his arc and the way he handled those moments was just so impressive that to me, it's going to be my lasting memory of this season and of this finals, is how well they handled those types of things.
I agree. And I think, look, as great a years they've had, even during the regular season, you'd watch them sometimes and you felt like when they got rolling offensively, there was like no team in the league that could really match up with them, because they have this combination of individual ability to take you off the dribble and score in isolation. And then they're elite level 3-point shooting. And when they were making the extra pass, they're incredibly hard to guard. But you also felt like, without that maturity level that you're talking about and understanding, like the clamp down effect of it at the same time, so you get what you got last night in that third quarter. I agree. They've grown in that way. There's no doubt. And I think one of the things that's helped them, Adam, is clearly like it's not having the weight of all of this on two guys. And
right.
even to say it another way, to have 60% of the weight or 65% of the weight on one guy and 35%
right.
on the other guy, because that's kind of what it felt like with Tatum and Brown in the past. And that's not the case now. And with the contributions that you got out of Holiday earlier in the series and last night, Derrick White last night had some big shots, and what he's meant for them in this series, Porzingis in game one, what he meant to them. It's now the luxury of it's spread out. And last night, look, Tatum and Brown were both great offensively. Tatum didn't have overall a great shooting night. He took a lot of threes, but he played great. And Jaylen Brown was incredible. And so, but they had other help as well. So it's more spread out, which enables those guys to have a greater margin for error on certain nights. And I think what that does is it just gives you more confidence that no matter what is about to happen, we're going to win. And I think that's maybe the most certain they've been. Clearly, since they've been together, it's because of the additions that they've made to this team. And all the three of those guys are recent additions that I mentioned. And what that has done now to give them all this confidence that there's not an answer for this team when they play the way that they've been playing, which is the pass that needs to be made is made in almost every case. Now, they went through a stretch, ironically, in the fourth quarter where I thought they got a little bit too trigger happy off one pass or ISO heavy. And that's what kind of helped Dallas guard them and get back into the game. But for the most part, that hasn't been the case. They've been playing really clean, and the Dallas defense, when they knew they needed to have stops out, they just weren't good enough to guard this team individually or collectively. The individual breakdowns led to a ton of mistakes in rotation and communication errors over and over and over because of the breakdowns individually off the dribble and inability to contain the ball. It led to all kinds of mistakes on the back end because you don't practice those situations where you're beaten all the time. You practice situations where you're containing the ball, and then where's the help and rotations coming from because you know where the ball is. Well, when you don't know where the ball is and it's constantly by you in the lane, there's all kinds of breakdowns take place, and you're relying on in split-second communication and reads, and they weren't making the right ones, and it's because of Boston's ability to get by them. So they played a flawless third quarter. That's ultimately was the difference in this game. In the game one, it was more about the first quarter and some of the second, right? And so they have these spurts that just make all the difference in the world. Dallas is not on their level during those moments, and that's what's been the difference in this series.
The ability to stop a run is an underrated trait of a team. And you're talking about that third quarter. Dallas couldn't stop it. I mean, it felt like it lasted the entire quarter. And the run you're talking about in the fourth quarter was really like a 6-minute run that Dallas had. It was a big one. And I'm glad you referenced the shot selection from Boston. Drew Holiday took a shot in that series where they were losing it. That was the wildest shot I've ever seen. They were like on a 13-0 run, the Mavs were, and Drew Holiday takes one with 18 on the clock on one leg, basically fires it up. And the thing about the Celtics and what I'm trying to get at with them is they have the ability to call a timeout, whatever it is, reset and come out and say, where's our bread and butter? What do we need to do now? And just stop the bleeding. And then to come up with big plays. Derrick White hit big shots. Drew Holiday hit big shots. Jaylen Brown hit big shots. Tatum had a big time dunk that was just physically had to go through a guy to get to it. It was such a great, like, his pure will to score that one. So to me, that is also a trait that stands out. Dallas looks rattled at times, and Luka, even as great as he is, looked rattled late in that game. Even when they were making the run, looked rattled. And Boston, they never looked rattled. They made bad decisions. You call a timeout, you regroup, and then you get back to who you are. And I've seen too many champions that have that trait that I just think it's an essential quality.
I think that the difference, a big difference in this series for me also has just been, I just think Boston just thinks to themselves, let's just play basketball. Something good's going to come out of this. And I think for Dallas, Luka is thinking like he's got to make something happen. And that's the difference, right? And as a result, he short-armed some shots in the paint, I think is what you're talking about. They look like they were going to be easy shots, even an opportunity for a three-point play after he got a guy in the air and he goes up. He's got a 2-foot shot by that point uncontested because the defender fouled him but then fell away trying not to foul. And he's got a little 2-footer in front of the rim and he hits the front of the rim. He missed just a couple, I think, very, very makeable shots during that stretch late in the game. And then, of course, the fouls. And look, the last foul, I tell you what, it's a tough one for me from this standpoint. Letter of the law, that's a block. I agree, because he's definitely not fully squared up to Brown and he's slightly moving.
Yep,
but
moving.
At the same time, like Jaylen Brown is taking all that action directly into his body. So and then I really believe if Jaylen Brown didn't fall, I don't think they make a call. I think they let him play on. Jaylen Brown would have hit him and then kind of went into the middle of the floor with a live dribble. I really believe they would have let it go. When Jaylen Brown starts to go to the ground, it's almost like you're going to have to call something at that point because his ball's about to be loose, and Luka was still moving. So I didn't have as much of a problem with that as the PJ Washington illegal screen in the backcourt. I thought that was a terrible
That one
call.
I know. That one actually I thought, why call that one there? Also, like 50-50 call, but also what are we doing? That's 70 feet from the basket in a key moment.
Totally agree. No, just senseless. But what I was going to say about Luka to finish that point, yeah, okay, people, I'm sure, in Dallas are outraged about that call. Like I said, I think it's a block. Technically, that's a block if you go by letter of the law. My problem is there were 2 other fouls, or at least maybe 3 earlier in the game that were just stupid fouls on the part of Luka Doncic. And when you're a star player, like he took his first foul, he took in front of Boston's bench. It was a total frustration thing. He hadn't gotten a call. Now he's just going to go up and he basically grabs Jayson Tatum, like as he's dribbling the basketball. And then, of course, he's freaking out. He's looking up at the screen with the ref, like, oh, he hooked me and stuff. But he grabbed Jayson Tatum's arm, and it was almost an intentional foul. And, when you're a star player, you don't ever take fouls like that. At no point, unless it's late in the game, which then it's a different category. I'm talking about in the first quarter. There's nothing that can happen that the other team can do, no matter what it looks like, how sure they're about to score, that is going to equate to you picking up that foul. That it's not, those things aren't equal. You give up 2 points. And in this case, I'm talking about Jayson Tatum was dribbling the ball in front of the bench. He wasn't even squared up to shoot. Jayson Tatum just grabbed him because he was frustrated by what just happened on the other end. So when you take fouls like that, you leave yourself susceptible to later in the game being in foul trouble. You just can't do it. And even on that play, Adam, frankly, if you're Luka Doncic and you just picked up your 5th right before that, when you tripped Jaylen Brown on another play, I'm sorry, Jaylen Brown's coming at you. You almost have to get out of the way. Just back up and turn. You can't risk contact. In that situation, you just can't risk it. Even if that means Jaylen Brown's about to get to the rim and lay it in, you have to be able to be smarter in the moment to understand it's more important to my team. I finished this game. I can't risk this. And he did, and it cost him. And so now you go 4.5 minutes. It's a 1-possession game at that time. And everybody kind of knew that at that point Dallas is cooked. You can't expect Kyrie to carry that kind of load when other guys weren't playing particularly great. So there you go. Luka didn't play a very smart game. I thought he was lazy. I don't think he demonstrated great leadership in this game at all. And then to top it off, he doesn't even get to see the last 4.5 minutes with his team. I just thought it was a very bad moment for him, bad look for him. And there's been some other ones in this series that have been the same. And it's something he's going to carry with him into the summer. And he's got to look in the mirror and ask himself about changing some things if they really want to break through and get this thing across the finish line, because they're clearly a contending team with him and Kyrie. Are you going to be good enough, though, in these moments? And they have not handled adversity well at all in this series.
And by they, you really mean him. I mean, it's other guys as well. Not to be, Kyrie obviously has had his struggles. Different guys have missed shots. But when you talk about what you're talking about right here, it's not about basketball. There's an emotional maturity component to it as we're watching Luka sort of melt down in some of the plays. And I'll tell you what, this run by Luka and this finals really reminds me a lot of Nikola Jokic from 2020. When you remember the great run they made in the bubble, surprised everybody by making it to the conference finals, go up against the Lakers. And in that series, Jokic emotionally was disrupted by Dwight Howard, the physicality that they allowed him, Anthony Davis, and different things. And he was in foul trouble constantly in that series. He was getting the type of fouls you're talking about where you're worried about foul trouble. And all of a sudden he's grabbing somebody in the backcourt to look at the ref and show him up. And you're thinking, guys, it's do or die. You can't do this.
Right.
With
Agreed.
Luka, one of the things I love about basketball and love about sports in general is it's not just about the talent. It's not just about the logic of what's going on the court. There's a human component to it. And it requires, you have to limit the flaws you have, your character flaws, your personal flaws. And I think we've seen this with Boston, who's come up short, with Tatum and Brown. They've had to go through these trials and are better than ever because of it. And I just think this is one where Luka's either going to learn and grow. We talked earlier in the year, people got mad at us. You were talking about his defense. And you said, well, he can be a good defender. There's too many plays where he lets his team, cover for him because he's in the backcourt not doing it. It's not that he's a bad defender. It's that he's not putting in what he needs to for these petty reasons. The fact that we're in the finals in a must-win game, and there were 2 instances you brought up in key moments where he was doing that, it tells you, what's the limit? If you can't do it in an elimination game in the finals, that just shows me you don't have it in you. And that's a thing that he's going to have to, unfortunately, reflect on and grow from. And to me, it's going to be the thing that determines what type of player he ultimately is.
Again, it's all fair, man. And I think one of the things I saw a lot in this series, I think initially against what Tatum and Brown in particular, it was more of a problem for him. His initial anticipation of what direction they were going was actually decent, where he would slide over on that first move and get his shoulders fairly square. He had no ability to then stay with them when they made their second move. And that's when they were just by him and he was in the rearview mirror. It's like he almost expected, okay, you go hard right hand to Jaylen Brown and I cut you off. And now you're going to back up and then pass it to somebody. And my job is over. And he goes into relax mode. And what Jaylen Brown would do, he'd go right, he'd cut him off. Jaylen Brown would spin out of that and get back into the middle. And then Luka would just basically wave at him at that point and pass him off to somebody else. So he's not super fleet of foot. The lateral quickness is not his strength. And he's guarding at that position, whether it's the 1, 2, or the 3, you're guarding really quick, athletic guys with size. That's not his strength. So it's got to be more about being smarter with how you play guys, understanding that guys are going to make tough contested shots sometimes with a hand up, but better that than getting completely broken down off the dribble where now you've put your team into some sort of chaotic rotation mode that is going to lead to something really, really good. He's got to have more pride in it, He's never going to look like a guy like, Giannis at his best, who would get down and it meant everything to him to guard you and try to keep him in front. He's not going to look like a guy like that ever. It's just not going to be part of his DNA. It doesn't mean he can't be marginally better than he is now. He doesn't have to be a stopper. He just can't be the reason that their defense is repeatedly broken down. And the same thing for Kyrie. And I thought they had reached a point where I felt like that wasn't the case a lot of nights. They weren't the weak link defensively in earlier series. It didn't feel that way to me. They certainly still would get beat occasionally, but it wasn't like it was so glaring to me as it has been in this series. And he's probably never been attacked like this in his life. And I think that does something to you mentally in terms of your own confidence. Like you think about it, man. You're a star on that level with that kind of ego and confidence and bravado that he plays with, and now you're being hunted like this, like targeted. Like we're going at you, man. What are you going to do about it? I think that rattles you a little bit, man, and you commit some dumb fouls, or it even probably throws you off your game on the other end of the floor a little bit. So will he get there? I don't know, Adam. I really don't know. I don't know if he'll ever push himself to that extent. I don't know. But I think people assuming that he won't ever break through, it's amazing to me the way people can shift their mentality to such extremes, because now the narrative out there is, look at Luka, you'll never win with them. Like, and that's what happens in this world now, right? Of reaction, and everybody's got a voice on social media. And that's kind of what you're feeling like. And I'm just going, wait a second, let's just wait and see. Now, things have to change. He has to improve in the areas we're talking about, or maybe he won't ever break through. But I don't think it's something that you can automatically write off and say he can't gain the maturity and the pride, personal pride, to address this. I think it's too early to say that about a guy like Luka, and he's so offensively talented. He's good. Look, he just got to the finals. He's going to be in the mix year after year. Question is winning the whole thing. That's a different story when you get to this round. You're playing a team this good, and that's what it's always going to be when you get to the finals.
Not only is it weird to say a guy won't get it, it's just as silly as saying that a guy for sure will get it. This is what makes sports so interesting. We don't know, but now that you're on the stage, you're flawed. Like, the deeper you go in the playoffs, the higher you climb, the more it's like, okay, we're going to see if there's any flaws under there. We're peeling the layers of the onion. Let's see what's under there. And now we're looking with Luka that there are some elements there that he has room for improvement on. And they're almost not even skill elements. They're almost more soulful elements. How does he have to contribute to his teammates? What kind of effort? How does he keep his calm under these moments? How does he not pick up fouls? Defensively, where can he improve? It's those types of things. And it's a fascinating story. And I'll say, again, likening him to Jokic, I think Jokic's transformation came in 2019. The bubble happens. But after the bubble, after that year, the story on Jokic was you can never win with him. Look at how much he got carved up by Anthony Davis and Dwight Howard in the playoffs. You can't win. That's his ceiling. He comes back, wins 2 MVPs, wins a championship, and then another MVP. We might be talking about this very moment, Luka's first finals, as the turning point to him, where he uncovers something new about himself and elevates to a new level. He's talented enough for sure to be that guy. And this is why sports are so great, is it goes beyond just talent.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be the conversation around him after this is over, whether that's in 4 games or 5. And I don't think it goes beyond 5 games. My hunch says this is going to end on Friday night.
I do too.
Because I think it's important to Boston to get this over with. I think that their mentality, they're so strong mentally right now, and they know they've got a team that's reeling, and you almost feel like they would have to have a let up in terms of their intensity for Dallas to win a game right now, the way they have them, hanging off a cliff. And I don't see that happening. And they're going to end up, if they do that, 16-2 in the postseason if they win Friday night. I mean, it's one of the best postseason records we've ever seen. It's incredible, right? So, and I think they want that. Like, they'd like to finish it that way, rather than the sour taste of a loss at any point now. Like, they're rolling to such an extent. They've got this team. They're in this team's head, and let's just finish this thing off. I'm not going to be shocked if Dallas were to win the game, but my hunch says it's not going to happen. And that's going to be Luka, right? Okay. His first NBA finals. I know they're not the same player, but think about like Shaq's first finals appearance, got swept. He talks about it to this day, what that did to him, what that meant to him, how humbling that is. Yeah. And like what he needed to do now, it's different because he's not out on the perimeter handling the ball and guarding guys in the perimeter. Like we're talking about with Luka, like these ways that's so impactful. Like Shaq just was like, okay, I'm just going to go be the most dominant force of my era, just continue to add bulk and mass and just be completely unstoppable. And then eventually, pair up with Kobe Bryant. And he gets it done. But I mean, he got swept. Luka's probably going to get swept, or 5 games at most. That's got to be something that's going to hopefully stir up some things in him in the offseason. But we don't know that. He might be very comfortable. I felt like James Harden got to a place where he's just so comfortable. It didn't matter as much to him, no matter how much heat he got over bad performances in big spots. And he never really adapted very much. So I'm not saying he's definitely going to, but we'll find out, man. He's at that age. He's going to be coming into these next several years where they're going to be in the mix because of him. And it's going to be a matter of how much are you willing to sacrifice for your team to get over the hump? And it remains to be seen. I'm not going to say he can't, but I'm certainly not going to say I fully expect it.
A person's greatness is oftentimes equal to their ability to handle criticism without resentment. And that's what this becomes now with Luka, is how much can I absorb the rightful criticisms of this run and grow from it. And if that's very little, if you're not able to, there's no low capacity for that. There's a low capacity for growth. So it'll be interesting to see how Luka handles this. If we just wrap up now, though, by talking about the Celtics, who are the inverse of this, again, I just couldn't be more impressed with them. And the guys they brought in over the last couple seasons, Holiday and White in particular, you probably couldn't pick two better players to surround that. Horford, Tatum, Brown, obviously Porzingis, who wasn't even there in this game, and they still win. But White and Holiday in particular, the epitome of guys that don't need much. They can fit in where they need to be, make big plays, and then have all of the personality elements that we're talking about. Forget the skill. They have all the personality elements of a team that can withstand a 20-2 run or whatever that run was from the Mavs and punch back and make big shots after it. I think this Celtics team, I'll be honest with you, they weren't my favorite team for two reasons. I don't love the amount of sidestepping and bat step threes in the NBA because I just feel it's so hard to contest those without fouling, that there is something to, I don't love teams that rely on that. And the same goes for dribble drives. You draw more fouls on dribble drives than ever. They do both of those things. And there's just something to me that I say, when a team relies so heavily on those things, I tend to sort of lean the other direction. Just a personal preference. But the way they play connected to me is so impressive. And that's why I loved watching them in this finals.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that at their best, this is what it looked like during the regular season. And then there were times that it didn't. And I think that's the only thing for me that raised any doubt, was because I felt they could help you guard them. And in this particular series, that hasn't been really a big factor, except for probably that stretch last night. I felt like a little bit when the Mavs got back in the game, it felt a little bit like that on nights I could watch Boston and feel that way about them for a stretch of a game. And sometimes I think maybe it's just because the game came so easy to them offensively. And they didn't have to show you like top tier championship level defense all the time, because their offense was so good. But look, there they are, man. And they've done it. And like, it's just funny, like people that, and I thought the Dallas Mavericks could win this series. I also, I started kind of really being behind the Mavericks and just liking them back in February. They made a hell of a run, but like people expect you to like be perfect in what you think's about to happen. And the people that are like on here are primarily Celtics fans. Like, yeah, because you pick the same team every night. Like it's fine. We get it. Like my job is to try to figure out how I think this is going to break down. And I think the things that didn't happen in this series that I thought could, I thought Dallas' defense would have more in effect. And when Boston played their style, their best way, Dallas no match for them. And I thought based on what I had seen that was going to be a better matchup. And it was not a great matchup for the Dallas Mavericks. I also, you don't expect their like main components of their offense to be cut off the way that it was. When you watch them play a certain style effectively almost every single night, with, the way that they would get the 3-pointer on the weak side and the way they would get the rim pressure with their centers, it was like basically completely cut off. They took that out of the series practically. And then some of the guys that they needed to play better didn't, in terms of making shots. So anyway you slice it, Boston has thoroughly outplayed them. But, I felt going into this, I felt Dallas had a really good chance to certainly give them a very competitive series and potentially win the series, because what I kept saying was, if these are close games, one possession games, like inside 4 minutes, I really like Dallas's chances. Well, last night was a one possession game with 4 minutes to go, and their best player was on the bench because he fouled out. The run that they made in game 2, I never really, that just to me didn't feel like a genuine run. It really didn't. It was so late in the game. And it felt like that just was not indicative of the way that game played out. And then in the first game, it completely got away from them early. So they never put Boston in that situation. Closest they got it was 8. And then it went to 20 right after that. So they haven't put Boston in the uncomfortable situations that I thought they could. That was a big part of why I thought they had a chance to win this series. But like, people want to beat you up, go ahead, take shots. When you're wrong, you're wrong. I admit it. I was wrong about this series. I'm going to be, when this series ends and Dallas loses, I think I'll be 12-3 in picking series in the playoffs. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. And a couple of those were road wins that I didn't see coming that were really important in big spots. So I'm okay with that. You're not going to get them all. And I'm not ashamed of it by any means. I had a good basis for what I thought. It hasn't played out that way. And I give Boston all the credit in the world.
What do you think it means for Boston that they won this without Porzingis? 'Cause it's almost a really 80 and 12 or 80 and 20 if that's what they go. 64 wins. That's what dominant numbers. But if you do this without Porzingis, that just shows the margin of error they have.
Well, first of all, I want to say this about Porzingis. Like, with what that guy's been through in his career with the injuries, and at one point, like, he went a long stretch of years where you felt like he was never available. And then he kind of turned it around when he was in Washington. And he started to play every night and play really well. And then, of course, he gets to Boston and a very good year for them, super impactful. I'm just grateful for him. After that long layoff with the injury, he at least had game one and a little bit of game two where he was so impactful, because now when they win this, he's going to feel like I had something to do. And I'm not talking about just like, oh, well, I was really important in the regular season, so I helped get us the number one seed. I'm just telling you the emptiness you feel if you don't contribute in this series is different. You know what I mean? Certainly you're glad as hell to get the ring. Like, I'm sure Peyton Pritchard right now, if he shoots poorly again next game, he's going to get a ring and he's super important to their team and he had a really good year and he got paid, all that stuff. He's going to be mad at himself for not shooting better in the finals because you want to feel like you contributed more. And I'm grateful at least for Porzingis. He had a major role in the start that the Celtics got off to in this series with the energy he provided and the production he provided in the first game. So I'm glad for him. And I think it just really kind of speaks to how scary good and versatile this team is, because he can go basically 2 full games, not play. You don't really see much of him. And this is the result. I'm sorry, a game and a half where he really isn't the same. And this is the result you get. You still win the way that they have. Unbelievably impressive.
100%, man. I'm just so impressed. I've actually even really enjoyed this Boston team in this finals much more than I had at any point during the regular season, to be honest with you, or even the playoffs up to this point. I just have enjoyed them. And I think it's a great story, a great multi-year arc of a franchise, and a great story of this team and how dominant they've become. Let's take a break. On the other side, though, I want to move in and talk about some of the other storylines around this one, kind of look ahead and just ask what's the difference between a sweep and 5 games. And then we'll talk about Jerry West, who passed away at the age of 86. We'll get to all of that here on the other side. First, we have a new partner I want to tell you about, the FitBod app. I got access to this just this week, and I'm telling you, we got your workout essentials. For me, I've got, like, because I'm 40 now, I've got all these different bands and stuff that I stretch. I spend like 20 minutes stretching at the gym before I get my lift in. And one of the things now that I love is I have the FitBod app that has me completely prepared for everything I need going into the gym, including workouts that are personalized to what it is I'm working for. You can say, oh, I've got 45 minutes today, or I've got an hour today, I've got 30 minutes today, whatever your time frame is. You plug that in and it gives you a workout that's going to fit your schedule. It's going to fit what it is you're looking for. It's going to adapt to your own personal goals. It's phenomenal. What I like about it is when you open it up, it gives you a rundown. Okay, you put in all what it is. I got this much time. I'm trying to do this. And then it sends you the workouts. And then if you click on the workouts, maybe you already are familiar with one, maybe you don't. They have these great videos and animations that show you everything you need to know about the lift. So you're not wondering, am I doing this right? Is this correct? It will tell you exactly how you need to do each workout, the different details of that workout, how many reps you should be doing. It's actually an unbelievable app. And right now, you can add FitBod to your workout essentials. Join FitBod today to get your personalized workout plan. Get 25% off your subscription, or try the app free at fitbod.me/allnba. That's fitbod.me/allnba. It really is an incredible app, especially if you're trying to do workouts. If you travel a lot and you're on the go, you can put in what equipment is available to you. So if you're at a hotel, you can just put in, okay, I've got some dumbbells, I've got a treadmill, whatever. It'll give you a personalized workout based on what you have available to you. So it's a really cool app. It's a great price, and you can get 25% off when you go to fitbod.me/allnba. Also want to tell you about DraftKings Sportsbook, the presenting sponsor of this show. Not a whole lot left to bet on the NBA. The draft is coming up. You can bet on that as well. But with this, you're really looking at finals MVP. And that's a good story, by the way, as well. Jaylen Brown currently minus 280. Jayson Tatum plus 250. I actually think Tatum could probably win that it's a long shot, but like a crazy game 4 might be enough to kind of tilt the odds. But I think what Jaylen Brown has done so far has been just unbelievable. So if you want to get on the action, DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the NBA. You can bet on same game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Don't miss out on the NBA as the postseason winds down. And if you're new to DraftKings, you can check this out. New customers get $5, or you bet $5 and you get 150 in bonus bets instantly, whether you win or lose. That's right. If you bet just $5, you win 150 in bonus bets instantly. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use that code ALLNBA, and new customers get the 150 bonus bet with just $5 bet. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 and over. Age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.co/bball for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources.
All right, back here, final segment here of the All-NBA show. We are going to be back tomorrow, probably stepping back and looking at some more big pictures things on the NBA rather than just straight preview as we typically would do. But let me ask you real quick, Legs. I feel like this is ending tomorrow night, Friday. Dallas has not shown me that they, I just would be a little surprised if they won. But my question is, the moment of the game that really makes me think that was the final, I don't know, minute, 2 minutes or whatever, when Boston made a run. It got tight and Boston made a run. Yes, Luka wasn't in the game, but I thought there was a little bit of a lack of faith. You can always tell when a team has lost a little bit of faith. And I thought Dallas lost a little in that last minute or so. And it just made me think it's hard to have any faith when you're down 0-3. What is the difference between a sweep and a 5-game series in a moment like this for players mentally?
You're saying was a difference after it's over? How do you feel? Do you feel any better about yourself, you're saying?
Going into it, how does a player look at that of like, we can't be swept, we have to get just one? Or is that not really a motivation at that point?
No, I really don't think it is. I don't think that you're worried about that, like the looks of that. Because the truth of the matter is it that big of a difference getting beat 4-0, 4-1? In either case, it doesn't look like you were really in the series. So I don't know that it matters. It's going to matter that much to them. I think what's hard in this situation is to play through getting hit with a run, because that's when the weight of it just hits you and you don't have that fight that it's going to take. And in Boston is at the exact same time sensing it. They're sensing you're ready to collapse. And that's when they really have been their best, when they kind of feel that out of you. And so that's what's Dallas going to have a hard time mustering. They might get off to another good start. They might play them tough for a while. If Boston hits them with a 10-0 run at some point in the third quarter, early fourth quarter, that's when it becomes really, really hard to find the internal resolve, because what you end up doing is looking at how insurmountable this deficit is. You're not in the moment anymore. You can be in the moment for when the game starts, because you're just playing basketball. And as long as it's tight, you're kind of feeling in the moment. This is just a basketball game. Let's just play, make the right play. When you go down 8-10, that's when it starts to hit you of what you're facing now. And then it's just can collapse from that point. I don't expect Dallas to win the game either. It would take, I think, some sort of an energy letdown on the part of the Boston Celtics. And I just don't know why that would be. You know what I mean? I don't know what, even though you know that it's got to feel a hell of a lot better for a team to win it on their home court, right? Just the atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's got to be, you know what I mean? It just is. It's got to be a better feeling to do it at home. You can't pick it. And certainly you'll take it anywhere you can get it when you don't have one, like these guys on Boston. But I'm not saying they'd be thinking ahead to that, and that's why their energy wouldn't be great because they want to do it at home. I'm not saying that. Anyway, it's going to be great for them and a relief. And I just got a feeling that at some point, second quarter, third quarter, whenever it may be, Boston hits them with another run, 10-0, 12-0, whatever it may be. And I think Dallas at that point is going to collapse.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. The letting go of the rope almost becomes easier because it requires so much belief to get over that. I will say this. You win this game 4, you get the sweep, you go 80-20. I don't know how many teams, I'm sure there's a stat out there. I don't know how many teams have won 80 games and only 20 losses. It would be an incredible achievement. And
one of the things you'd have to consider in that question, and then this is pretty cool. We should probably research this maybe for when this is all over, for the next time we're on the air, is, you think about, it hasn't always been 4 rounds of best of 7. So like that alone is going to eliminate a lot of great teams. It's hard to get to that number. You get to 80, like you got to win 16 more games in the postseason, tack it on to your regular season total. That didn't used to be the case. I mean, there used to be fewer rounds. There used to be, my goodness, the first round was a best of 3 at one point. So, that's 2 fewer right there. It's like, so that You're alone, right. The fact that like these playoffs now, it's 4 rounds, best of 7. And it's been that way for a while. But I'm just talking about some of those earlier teams in the NBA that had big regular season win totals. There wasn't the opportunity to get to 80 because you didn't have that many chances to win postseason games. So you're right. I would be curious to see how many teams historically have done that.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to, I have 2 things for you. One I prepped you for, one I probably should have, but I just listened to it as I was getting ready for the show this morning. And that is, Doc Rivers went on a podcast with Bill Simmons earlier today, and he talked about Dame Lillard. And Lillard, before the trade, had a very weird year. He knew he was going to get traded, and he wasn't working out. This is the story Doc tells. Wasn't working out. And he said he came into the season, or came into training camp out of shape. And if you come in out of shape, you never get into shape. Which, one, I just thought was a very interesting point. And I don't think he was criticizing Dame. He actually laid all the things that are going on in his personal life and trying to get traded. And, you're not even allowed to trade at some points because you don't want to injure yourself. But I thought it was a very interesting comment because we hear about guys playing themselves into shape all the time. And I just wondered what you thought of that. First, that concept of, can a player come in out of shape but be in shape by the time, midway through the season?
Probably, but I think the bigger picture there would be, why are they not in shape when they get there? Because that to me speaks to mentality of the player and like what you're using your off season for. Are you using it for rest and relaxation? Well, then you're probably going to hit the wall every year and you're going to run into something better, no matter how great your talent is. Are you using that to not only hone your conditioning, but you're always adding stuff? And it's right. Obvious when you get to camp. Like, then there's a lot of guys that would fall into that category. And you can just tell early in the year what they've been doing in the off season. Not to say that you start that the week after. You got to take some time to let your body recover. And certainly, you spend some time with family and stuff like that. But by the time you get to like midsummer, that's when the guys that show up that way and it's obvious, that's when they start. So I don't know what Luka does. I'm assuming you're asking this question about Luka. I don't know.
No, not really. I mean, Zion Williamson's another guy you could throw. There's a handful of players that I think that's been a criticism of them coming in. And I'm just curious. I was just curious if that was, I never heard that before.
Yeah. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I mean, you're talking about guys that matter. So you're talking about guys that are going to be playing 35 to 38 minutes a night. And, yes, I will say this, there's not nearly as much off game day workouts and practice and putting your body through stuff. Like the NBA now, on the days you don't play games, like their whole mission is to preserve you. So it's harder than it used to be. When like in my era, you were still taping up for practice on a lot of those off days and scrimmaging hard and going up and down the court, even if it was for an hour, whatever it may be. And so there was more built-in game-like conditioning that was going on so you could get there faster. But when you're playing 35, 38 minutes a night and you're playing 3-4 games a week and you do that for 3 months, I mean, you're going to get yourself close to being in this kind of shape you need to be in. The bigger question is, though, what does it say about you that you weren't willing to push yourself to that extent in the offseason?
Well, I think with Dame,
that's a bigger question for me.
I think with Dame, though, he's known as a hard worker. He's been in great shape his whole career. I think it was more circumstantial. And Doc went on to say that he's already doing 2-a-days right now. Like And one of his points was, think about how hard it is to win a title. Damian Lillard is preparing for the 2025 title, and the 2024 title hasn't even been decided yet. That's how long this process is in the NBA. And I think he was not trying to throw Dame under the bus, so to speak, but more to explain that the circumstances around, he was traded 3 days before camp began last year. Very unique circumstances where he had to not risk injury, and as a result, it set him back. I just thought it was an interesting thing, and I'll tell you this. Zion was an interesting story this year because of that. And Christian Clark, who covers them on the beat at NOLA.com, I know at the in-season tournament wrote a scathing article about how he's not in shape. And it was sourced. He talks to people in the organization. He wasn't just saying this from the couch. This was a thing that was well known, but nobody had said. And I'm not saying it was because of that article that Zion got in shape, but he did get in phenomenal shape after that moment and, through the course. But I know a lot of people are very sensitive to athletes being criticized that way. And I sit here and I think, why? It's one of the most important aspects of basketball that you are in your absolute apex playing condition. And when athletes aren't, to me, it just seems like it's a very fair criticism that people seem to be uncomfortable with.
And yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. I think that, and I can just draw off my own personal experiences and what I put myself through and I had teammates of varying degrees of conditioning coming in. One of the guys I always marveled at was John Stockton when I played in Utah. And, we're in camp and you got to go through the stress test they put you through where they put you on a treadmill. They crank it up to a certain speed. Every couple of minutes, they increase the incline and increase the speed. By the end of that, and you go as long as you can. And you have to reach a certain threshold and then you're done. They'll stop it if you want because you passed the fitness test they're looking for. But then some guys would just say, no, keep going. They wanted to see how far they could go, even though they'd already passed the threshold. And I just remember Stockton, it got to the point where they literally had to just force him to stop. At the end of it, it looks like you're running as fast as you possibly can straight up the side of a mountain. And like here's John Stockton with nothing to prove at that point in his career, nothing to prove whatsoever. And he was doing that. It always stood out to me. Karl Malone, I remember that same year, you go through a really hard 2-hour practice, as hard as it could be, tough practice. And then right after, you'd be walking to the locker room, and on the way to the locker room, they had another glass room where you could walk down the hallway and look inside with all the cardio equipment. And there'd be Karl Malone, doing another 45 to 60 minutes on a stair climber. And you're just this is the kind of stuff that the great ones do because they're so obsessed with an edge. And that is an edge. That is an edge. Being able to play at a higher level when you get fatigued and being able to just play through anything that your body feels physically is a skill. And you obtain that innately. Some guys are born with it. Some guys, they develop it over time, but it's really important. And it is a differentiating factor with players and the level that they can achieve and the number of rungs in the ladder they can climb and their status in this league. It's important. And I was marveled at the guys that could do it, even though they had no reason to challenge themselves in terms of, it was just accepted. You are who you are. You're a certain status. You're delivering every night. You're playing great every night, but yet you're still doing that. And it wasn't for show. It was no, this is what it takes. And then you know what else that does? It forces role players on the team to say, well, he's doing that. I guess I better do it too.
100%. 100%. I love that last point in particular because there is a tone setting of that where you just feel like, am I dropping the ball here if everybody else is going that hard? Last one on that point real quick. I'm curious. You played for a lot of teams. What's the gap in teams that really demand that of you? Is there a gap or is every team the same? Because I always hear the stories of the Heat where they'll pinch you on the belly as you're walking down the hall and say, hey, man, get in better shape. Is there a gap between how serious coaches or teams or whatever carry those?
Yeah. And I won't call out specific teams and coaches and staffs or whatever, but yes, absolutely. It's not universal across the board, man. A lot of it has to do with the culture expectations of the organization you're with. And that there's either a winning sort of aura around the organization or not. There's a mediocre aura, where mediocrity is just kind of accepted. There's the organizations that it's not. And even when in down years, they're constantly trying to find ways to get back to the top. And then you have the other organizations, a handful that it's just not part of their culture at all. And they kind of stay mired in where they're at for years and years and years. So yes, to answer your question, there's a dramatic scale in terms of how these organizations differ. Now, I would say this was when I played. I would say now it might be more universal than it's been because there are like how many people on staffs of these teams. When I played, it was like the same guy that was like your strength and conditioning coach on your off day for weightlifting was the exact same guy that was going to have to be back there with you when you were rehabbing an injury. It was like there was one guy filling roles. Right. And so now I feel like there are specialists that every organization has on so many different areas. There's so many people employed by the team. I feel like this stuff has become more universal in how they're approaching that kind of stuff. Even though the off day stuff is definitely a lot lighter than it used to be. It's probably even more challenging for those guys to figure out a way to reach peak physical condition when you're not really putting yourself through a whole lot on the off day.
The last thing we'll wrap up with today, Jerry West passed away at the age of 86 yesterday. And here's where what I want to ask you about it. First of all, if you got to know him and any insight you had to him, but this is how I look at Jerry West. There are very few people that I feel understand all aspects of basketball. Very few players that go on to be great analysts. You're one of them. Very few players that go on to be great coaches, great front office. But the more you can do, if you're a great coach and a great analyst and a great player and you were a great front office person, to me, it's like, man, you really grasped all aspects of the game. You understood it. Jerry West, to me, might be number one on the list of that guy understood basketball inside and out, as evidenced by what he was as a player and as evidenced by how he built some of the greatest teams in NBA history across multiple decades. A guy that clearly understood the game at a core. That's my impression of him, but I'm curious what yours is.
Yeah, and look, I've met Jerry West. I can't sit here and say I know him well. I never was with an organization that he was a part of where maybe you had more daily interaction with him, but it would more like I'd see him at events, All-Star Weekend, things like that. And here's what always struck me. He's one of those guys that transcends like what team he played for. It doesn't matter if you're a Lakers fan. Like you have a general reverence for this person. And when I was in his presence, you always felt like you knew and you felt this was a legendary figure. And he is so universally respected. When you look at the different areas in which all this praise is coming in over the last 24 hours, just look at it, man. There's no boundaries in terms of where the walls are put up. And if you're on the other side of the wall, you just couldn't love Jerry West for whatever reason, because you were a Celtics fan or like whatever it may be, or, the race component or whatever it may be, right? That gives people boundaries for why they like certain players. He broke them all down. Everybody universally regarded this guy as the real deal. He played both ends of the floor. His numbers are beyond reproach. We know that he lost a bunch in the finals. He had the misfortune of being in that era when they couldn't get past the Celtics most years. But then it's what he did after that and the way he continued to imprint the game in all the different areas that you mentioned. He just had a way about him, man, just the way he spoke, an ease about him. But there was also, every time you were looking at him speak, it was just this toughness that he was portraying, even though he was so soft-spoken. It was like you knew this was not a dude that you would want to challenge to anything, right? Yeah. He'd fight you at the drop of a hat, even though he had a very easy way of communicating and an easy way of delivering his message. And as a result, the respect is just across the board. And it's a sad day always when the league loses someone like this. Certainly you feel for his family first and foremost, the ones that really knew him on a daily basis and the impact he had on their lives. But as a league, you feel it now, and this is two icons here in recent times with Bill Walton and now Jerry West. It's heavy. Some heavy hits here the league has taken with regards to some of these legendary people that they have lost, and he's not the kind of guy that can be replaced. Obviously, that's why he is the logo.
What a great observation about his both gentleness and toughness. Because you're right. I saw an interview with him like in the last year where I just remember thinking like, that's a tough SOB, man. 86 years old, and you could just tell. All right, we got some super chats, Emma, to get out on. What do we got? Jay Money says, Adam can't help but think if the Nuggets made it, they had the Celtics' number all year. Celtics couldn't keep up in both games. I mean, they had their number in that they won both games by a combined 4 points. So I don't know how much stock you want to put into that.
Well, the thing is, we'll never know. I know this is fun to do. I personally, listen, going into the playoffs, I thought Denver over Boston. That's what I was expecting to see. I thought Denver was going to repeat, and I think that clearly it would have been a better series than what Dallas has given them. But look, Denver wasn't up to the task to get past that Minnesota team. They couldn't do it. And that's part of the reason I had so much belief in Dallas was because of what Minnesota did to Denver. And then to watch Dallas operate the way they did offensively against Minnesota, that gave me that gave me great hope. And but so this is obviously a whole nother level that Boston's on from that team. And it's nice to say what if. We'll never know, unfortunately. This is the matchup that I think everybody still needs to see. Maybe you get it next year. We'll see.
It could be one of those things. I remember, sometimes you get a trilogy like that where the teams don't play each other and then they meet in the third year. And it was like they clearly were the two best teams over a 3-year arc, but only played each other once. It happens that way. Lakers Celtics happened that way in the 80s, before meeting several times. I think the thing I'll say about it, I agree with you. The Nuggets, talent-wise, I think we look at that and we say they had the talent, they could have done this, the matchup, whatever. Denver was missing things that the Celtics have proven to possess. The toughness, the ability, the connectedness. Denver was clearly missing those this year in a way they were not missing them last year. So the same fallacy can be made when you say, oh, Denver would have won. If they would have won, they would have won. They didn't. So I don't buy into that narrative. What else we got? Joshua Boraz says, now that Luka fouled out in crunch time of Game 3 of the NBA Finals, what role will defense play in your future rankings of the best NBA players?
Well, listen, I think, in terms of the way I evaluate it, yeah, it plays in. It's a factor in it, definitely. But so is offensive dominance. So let's say everything is weighed. You would never say a guy's the best player in the league. That's like a first team all league defender that averages 18 points a game. Right. So it's the same. Listen, his offense is so good and so dominant that's going to weigh in also, man. But the defense is a detraction for him. I think personally, the year that he had and the fact they got to the finals, regardless of how this is ending for him and the Mavericks, I think going into the year, you could say Luka Doncic could be a front runner for MVP if the Mavericks win enough games in the regular season. They haven't been able to do that to this point to make it a serious discussion for him. Finished third this year, but there was a win gap there between them and Oklahoma City and Denver. If they get up to the upper to mid 50s, which will put them somewhere in that top 2 or 3 in the West, most likely, I think he's got a really good chance because the numbers are going to be so dramatic. Like the offensive dominance this year, it's not, he created more offense than any player ever has in the history of the game, scoring and facilitating. Like that's a big thing. And so now you go into the year. And ultimately, if it's really tight and there's a better candidate, that they have similar numbers and somebody plays better defense, then that player will get MVP. I'm just saying you don't know who that's going to be at the time. Will that team have enough team success? I think he absolutely is in the best position next year going into the season that he has been to this point to legitimately win an MVP. Do you agree with that, Adam?
I think so. The finals, it'll be interesting how that lingers. But I said even after the conference finals, Luka's almost a lock to win the MVP as long as their record is good enough and the story, MVP is often a narrative, a story, as long as there's a decent enough story attached to it. But what I'll say is offense and defense are not equal. It always drives me nuts when people try to do this. Offense and defense are just not equal in the NBA. Offense is more important for an individual standpoint. Defense more important collectively. It's more about how the team works together. So I always find that to be so reductive and misleading. What else we got? Cam says, Legs, if you could add any teammates you've ever played with in your NBA career to the Mavs team to help this series, who would you choose?
Oh, man. That's a good one. Karl Malone would be a good one. Chris Mullin would be a good one.
Oh, Chris Mullin, they could use some shooting.
Chris Mullin wouldn't help you as much defensively, although he was a pretty smart, crafty, and he had really good hands, and he was a good positional defensive player. He was similar in that, he's going to have a hard time locking guys up on the perimeter, but would you like to have that shooting stroke to play alongside Luka and Kyrie Irving? They're two of my favorite teammates too as well. So that's one of the reasons. Chris Mullin to this day, good friend.
How'd those shooting competitions go between you two?
Yeah, it's funny. We talked earlier about, I said how when the star players act a certain way in terms of their work ethic, it makes you kind of jump on board. I always looked at myself as like one of the hardest workers, I had to make it, to survive in the league and particularly with my shooting reps. And then I get to Golden State in 1995, and I walk in the locker room and Chris Mullin's there. And at that point, it was this guy I really looked up to. And, we weren't very good at that time. And I just remember like going through practice, doing my normal, okay, here we go. Everybody's kind of leaving. I'm going to be one of the few guys left. I'm going to do all kinds of shooting reps after. Did it. Mullin was there, did it together, maybe a couple other guys. They leave. I'm ready to go. Mullin, turns out, wasn't going to the locker room. He was just going to get a drink. And then he was still going. And I was like, okay, wait a second. There's no way I can leave now if he's still going to be out there. And so now, next thing you know, I'm out there and you're playing one-on-one with Mullen, and he almost lived at the arena. It was incredible. And it's like, it rubbed off on me. I know that, like, in terms of how I viewed what really top tier work ethic was.
Love that, man. What a great anecdote. Last one, Emma. Dane Tiran says, have the Jays reached the same echelon of Celtics greats like Pierce and KG? Also, shout out Tillman. The non-Horford minutes should have swung Dallas's way. 18 for the four-relief clover there. I like that question. So, I mean, I guess this is something we could probably do on Monday. Maybe we'll couch it. Dane Tran, I'm going to do that. I'm going to couch it. Let's wait. I never like to do the celebration before the end, but that'll be something that when this inevitably wraps up for the Celtics, that'll be a very interesting topic of discussion that we'll get into. Cue that outro music, Emma. Legs, 3-0, man, almost over. We might be done by this. One more day of the NBA season, and we might have to turn the page.
Could be. It could dramatically change our weekends, probably too.
Probably could. You know what? I wouldn't mind not having any homework Saturday and Sunday. I wouldn't mind it. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully, we provide you some good analysis, some good insight. Hit that like button for us. We'll see you tomorrow.
All city like the mayor.